Just cover her face in the photos. My stepsister Brittany said those words to her photographer while I stood 3 feet away, and her bridesmaids laughed so hard their champagne spilled onto the marble floor. But 5 years later, when Brittany opened her favorite magazine to find my face on the cover with the headline "The Most Beautiful Woman in Fashion," she called me for the first time in half a decade, and I let it ring. Before I tell you what happened when she finally tracked me down and begged for something she never thought she'd need, take a moment to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. This story might just change how you see beauty, rejection, and the power of becoming your own definition of enough. My name is Natalie Vance. I'm 29 years old, and I spent the first 2 decades of my life believing I was the ugliest girl in every room. It started when I was 7. That's when my father married Sandra, a stunning blonde real estate agent with perfect teeth and a daughter named Brittany who looked like she'd stepped out of a children's beauty pageant. Because she had. Multiple times. Brittany was everything I wasn't. She had golden hair that fell in perfect waves. She had bright blue eyes and a button nose and skin that seemed to glow from within. She was petite and delicate and feminine in all the ways that little girls are taught to be. I was tall for my age, gangly and awkward with limbs I hadn't grown into. I had wild dark hair that refused to be tamed, thick eyebrows that my stepmother called, unfortunately, ethnic, and a gap between my front teeth that made me afraid to smile. My skin was olive-toned in a town full of golden tans, and I had what Sandra delicately referred to as a strong nose. It's a shame, I once overheard Sandra telling my father, Natalie would be almost pretty if she just looked a little more normal. Normal. That word haunted me my entire childhood. Brittany made sure I never forgot my place. She was 2 years older than me, and from the moment our parents married, she treated me like a charity case, the unfortunate stepsister she had to tolerate but never accept. Don't stand next to me in photos, she'd say before every family event. You make me look washed out. Maybe try some makeup, she'd suggest with fake sweetness. It might help, distract from things. And my favorite, delivered at her sweet 16 while I sat alone in the corner, God, Natalie, why do you even come to these things? Nobody wants to look at you. I wish I could say I stood up for myself. I wish I could say I had some spark of defiance, some inner fire that refused to be extinguished. But I didn't. I believed every word. I believed I was ugly, unworthy, invisible. I believed that my face was something to be hidden, apologized for, ashamed of. My father never defended me. He was too busy keeping Sandra happy, too worried about rocking the boat. And Sandra? She simply smiled and said things like, Brittany's just being honest, Natalie. You shouldn't take it so personally. By the time I graduated high school, I had perfected the art of disappearing. I wore baggy clothes. I kept my head down. I never looked in mirrors longer than necessary. I had no friends, no boyfriends, no social life whatsoever. I was a ghost in my own existence. I applied to colleges far away, anywhere that would take me, anywhere that wasn't here. I got into a small art school in New York City on a partial scholarship. It wasn't prestigious or fancy, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was 3,000 miles from Brittany's perfect shadow. I thought escaping would fix everything. It didn't. The voice in my head, the one that sounded like Brittany and Sandra and every cruel comment I ever absorbed, followed me across the country. But New York did something else. It showed me a world I'd never known existed. I saw women who looked like me, tall and angular, with strong features and unconventional beauty, walking runways and filling magazines. I saw dark hair celebrated, not criticized. I saw ethnic features called exotic, striking, powerful. For the first time in my life, I saw people who made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd been looking at myself through the wrong lens. My transformation didn't happen overnight. It started small, a new haircut, better posture, clothes that actually fit my body instead of hiding it. I started going to therapy, unpacking 2 decades of internalized shame. I learned words like gaslighting and emotional abuse and realized that what Brittany and Sandra had done to me had a name. In my junior year, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in Washington Square Park, sketching, when a woman approached me. She was in her 50s, elegant, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. Excuse me, she said. I'm a casting director. Have you ever considered modeling? I laughed. Actually laughed. I think you have the wrong person. She didn't smile. I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't have the wrong person. She handed me a card. Come to this address tomorrow at noon. If you don't like what you hear, you can leave. But I think you should hear it. I almost threw the card away. Almost. But something made me show up the next day. The casting director's name was Margaret Holloway, and she worked for one of the most prestigious modeling agencies in the world. She sat me down in her office and told me something I'd never heard before. You have a face the camera loves, she said simply. High cheekbones, dramatic features, perfect symmetry. The industry is changing, Natalie. We don't want cookie-cutter pretty anymore. We want striking. We want memorable. We want faces people can't forget. She leaned forward. You have that face? The question is whether you're brave enough to use it. I signed with her agency that week. The first 2 years were hard. Rejection after rejection. Casting directors who said I was too ethnic or not commercial enough. I almost quit 100 times. But Margaret believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. And then, slowly, things started to change. I booked a small campaign for an indie jewelry brand. Then a bigger one for a shoe company. Then a fashion editorial for a magazine I'd never heard of, which led to another magazine, which led to another. My look, the one I'd been told my whole life was wrong, suddenly became exactly what the industry wanted. By 26, I was walking runways in Milan and Paris. By 27, I had my first Vogue cover, Italian Vogue, but still. By 28, I was the face of a major cosmetics campaign, my strong nose and ethnic features plastered on billboards in Times Square. And at 29, I got the call that changed everything. Glamour magazine, the magazine Britney had subscribed to since she was 13, the one she shoved in my face countless times saying this is what real beauty looks like, wanted me for their cover. Not just any cover. Their annual Most Beautiful Woman in Fashion issue. The cover was shot in Los Angeles. I wore a flowing gold gown, my dark hair wild and free, my features, the same features I'd been told to hide my entire life, illuminated and celebrated. The headline read, Natalie Vance, the face that changed fashion. The issue came out on a Tuesday in March. By Wednesday, my phone was flooded with messages. Old classmates, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly remembering that we'd been so close growing up. And then, on Thursday morning, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Natalie, it's Britney. Can we talk? It's important. Please. I stared at that message for a long time. 5 years of silence. 5 years since her wedding, where she'd told the photographer to cover my face. 5 years since I'd left that reception early, crying in an Uber, vowing to never let her make me feel small again. And now, 3 words, can we talk? I didn't respond. A week later, I was back in Los Angeles for a photo shoot when my assistant told me someone was waiting in the lobby. She says she's your sister? My blood went cold. I almost told security to remove her. Almost. But something made me want to see her face. Not for reconciliation, for closure. Britney was sitting in the waiting area, looking exactly like she always had. Perfect blonde hair, designer clothes, flawless makeup. But there was something different about her. Something dimmer. The confidence that had always radiated off her like a weapon seemed muted. She stood when she saw me, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. I was wearing simple clothes, jeans and a silk blouse, but I knew I looked different. I carried myself differently. 5 years of being told I was beautiful by the world had finally started to undo what she spent 20 years destroying. Natalie, she breathed. Oh my God. You look different? I kept my voice neutral. Or are you trying to figure out which part of my face to cover? She flinched. Good. I deserve that, she said quietly. I deserve worse than that. Can we sit somewhere and talk? Against my better judgment, I led her to a private room. We sat across from each other, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Britney broke the silence. I saw the magazine. I figured. You're on the cover of Glamour. She shook her head slowly. Glamour, Natalie. The magazine I used to wave in my face while telling me what real beauty looked like. I remember. She closed her eyes. I was horrible to you. Yes. You were. I made your life miserable. I told you were ugly every chance I got. I made you hide in photos. I made you believe, her voice cracked. I made you believe you weren't worth being seen. I said nothing. I just watched her, this woman who had haunted my nightmares for 2 decades, finally crumbling under the weight of her own cruelty. I need to tell you something, she continued. Not as an excuse. There is no excuse. But as, I don't know. Context. Confession. Whatever you want to call it. I waited. Britney took a shaky breath. My mom, Sandra, she was obsessed with beauty. You know that. But what you don't know is what she did to me behind closed doors. She looked down at her hands. She put me on diets when I was 8. She told me if I gained weight, no one would ever love me. She entered me in pageants and screamed at me if I didn't win. She once told me that my face was my only value, and if I ever lost my looks, I'd have nothing. I felt something twist in my stomach. Not sympathy, not yet, but recognition. A different kind of cruelty, aimed in a different direction. So when you came along, Britney continued, with your natural beauty that you didn't even have to try for, your features that were so different from everything I'd been told was acceptable. I was terrified. My mom kept comparing us. She'd say things like, "At least Brittany knows how to present herself," but I could see her looking at you sometimes with this calculation. Like she was wondering if you might grow up to be prettier than me. She laughed bitterly. "And you did. God, Natalie, you did. The whole world sees it now. But I saw it then. And instead of dealing with my own insecurities, I made you carry them. I tore you down so I could feel tall." She wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I'm so deeply, horribly sorry." The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. I sat with her words for a long moment. Part of me wanted to forgive her instantly, to hug her and say it was okay and pretend the past didn't matter. That's what the old Natalie would have done. The one who made herself small to keep the peace. But I wasn't that Natalie anymore. "I hear you," I finally said. "And I believe that what Sandra did to you is awful. But Brittany, I was a child. I was 7 years old when you started telling me I was ugly. I didn't know about your mother's abuse. I just knew that my stepsister hated the way I looked, and I believed her for 20 years. Brittany nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not saying I'll never forgive you," I continued. "But I'm not there yet. And I don't owe you my healing on your timeline." "I know," she whispered. "I know you don't." We sat in silence for another moment. Then Brittany reached into her bag and pulled out a magazine, the glamour issue with my face on the cover. "I bought 10 copies," she said with a watery smile. "I'm giving them to everyone I know. I told my book club that my sister is the most beautiful woman in fashion." She set the magazine on the table between us. "I know it doesn't fix anything. But I wanted you to know that I see you now, Natalie. I see you." I looked at the magazine. At my own face, glowing under professional lighting, celebrated instead of hidden. "That's a start," I said quietly. "That's a start." Brittany left that day without asking for anything more. No forced reconciliation, no dramatic hug, no promise that everything was forgiven. Just an apology, an explanation, and a stack of magazines. It was more than I expected. Less than I needed. But it was real. 6 months later, I got another unexpected message, this time from Sandra. She wanted to have lunch. She said she was proud of me and wanted to reconnect. I didn't respond to that one either. Some apologies are genuine. Others are just people trying to attach themselves to your success. I'd spent too long learning to recognize the difference to fall for it now. My father called a few weeks after that. We talked for an hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years. He cried. He apologized for never protecting me. He told me he'd started therapy after seeing my magazine cover, realizing how badly he'd failed me. "I thought ignoring it would make it go away," he said. "I thought if I just kept the peace, you'd be fine. But you weren't fine, were you?" "No, Dad," I said. "I wasn't." "I'm sorry, Natalie. I'm so sorry." That apology I accepted. Not because it erased the past, but because I could hear him actually grappling with it. Actually changing. That's the thing about forgiveness, it's not about pretending the wound never existed. It's about deciding you're done letting it bleed. Last month, I was invited to speak at a conference for young women in fashion. The theme was redefining beauty, and the organizers wanted me to share my story. I stood on that stage and looked out at hundreds of faces, some confident, some uncertain, some carrying the same invisible scars I'd worn for years. When I was 7, I began, someone told me I was ugly. And I believed them. For 20 years, I believed them. I hid my face, my body, my entire self. I thought that if I could just disappear enough, maybe the world would stop seeing whatever was so wrong with me. The room was silent. But that's what I learned. The people who try to make you feel ugly are usually the ones who are terrified of your light. They're not describing you, they're describing their own fear. Their own insecurity. Their own inability to handle someone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. I thought about Brittany. About Sandra. About every cruel word I'd absorbed like poison. You don't have to wait for their apology to start believing in yourself. You don't have to wait for the magazine cover or the runway or the billboard in Times Square. You can decide, right now, that the only opinion of your beauty that matters is your own. I smiled, the same smile I'd hidden for years because of a gap between my teeth. My stepsister told a photographer to cover my face at her wedding. 5 years later, my face is on the cover of her favorite magazine. I paused. But that's not the victory. The victory is that I finally see what she was so afraid of all along. I touched my chest. Exactly as I am. Unapologetically visible. Unapologetically beautiful. And absolutely, completely uncoverable. The room erupted in applause. After the event, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been older than 16, tall, gangly, with wild curly hair and features that didn't fit the cookie-cutter mold. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said shyly. "I get told I'm ugly all the time. My sister says I look like a giraffe. But seeing you up there..." She trailed off, eyes wet. "Maybe I'm not as wrong as they say." I pulled her into a hug. You're not wrong at all, I whispered. You're just early. The world hasn't caught up to you yet. But it will. She left with my business card and a promise to stay in touch. I walked out of that conference center into the Los Angeles sunshine, thinking about the girl I used to be. The one who believed she deserved to be hidden. The one who thought her face was a mistake that needed correcting. That girl is gone now. But I carry her with me, not as a wound, but as a witness. A reminder of how far I've come and how many others are still making that journey. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not beautiful, by a family member, a classmate, a stranger, or the voice in your own head, please hear me, me. They were wrong. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not the wrong shape or the wrong color or the wrong anything. You are a face the world hasn't learned to see yet. And when it does, when you let yourself be seen, you will take their breath away. My stepsister said to cover my face in the photos. Now my face is the photo. And I've never looked better. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to know how many people are out there learning to see themselves clearly for the first time. And remember, the people who told you to hide were never protecting you. They were protecting themselves from your light. Shine anyway. This is Natalie Vance. And this is my truth.